Well, hi there, kids. It's your old pal Stevie Coyle. Very casual today. It's the crack of noon on the West Coast here. And welcome to the Friday Noontime Facebook Webcast. Normally webcast from Mighty Fine Guitars in Lafayette, California, but these are not normal times. Have we got a picture and everything, Ducky? We're rolling? Okay, good. Let me know if the sound is clipping or anything at all. I have no idea what we're going to talk about today. There we go. Oh, that's camera could come up a little bit, couldn't it? Cutting off the top of my head. I'm not sure that's bad, but it's what's happening. Let me fix that a little bit. Hi there, kids. Don't mind me. I'm just here to fix the TV. And I have my trusty assistant, Mighty Muggsy, helping out there. Is that a little better? Oh, we can't tell yet, can we? Thank you for putting up with this. Like I say, very casual day here. Just barely out of the jammies. That was great. That's Muggsy. He'll be popping in and out. And thanks again to Miss Valerie May for helping out with the technical aspects of today's show and providing coffee and porridge. Ah, very, very nice. One of the things I wanted to talk about today, there was a gentleman, Carl, I hope you're online right now, and if not, I'll send you back to this video later on, that was asking about, he was having trouble and posted to one of the fingerstyle groups, I think. Having trouble palm muting. Well, palm muting, first of all, it's a misnomer. It's not the palm of your hand that you're using to mute with. It's the heel of your hand. And typically, the reason you'd want to palm mute is to get that sound where your right thumb on the bass notes is we're jumping right into the geekery here, kids. The right thumb is playing notes that are nice and muffled, like a stand-up bass would sound, thump, thump, thump. The high end is almost entirely attenuated. There's no ringiness. There's no reverberation to speak of there. The note tends to be kind of quick and muffled. And that's the sound you want by what they call palm muting, heel muting. Now, if you growed up playing classical music, like, you've probably got your fingers fairly perpendicular to the strings, and that's going to make palm muting really tough for the steel string guitar. And the reason for that, a lot of folks say, well, why is it that classical guitarists play with one leg up on the phone book, and they're playing on the left knee, and the guitar is tilted up like this? Well, the primary reason for that is that the width of the fingerboard on a classical guitar is 2 inches. That's really wide. That's one reason. So there's no chance for most of us that you're going to get over with a thumb over in the first place. The primary reason, though, the primary reason is that on classical guitar, to get a nice pingy, percussive sort of sound, you do this thing that doesn't happen so much on steel string guitar called a rest stroke. And that's where you pluck a string and you rest the finger on the adjacent string, and you get that thing going there. Now, for that, of course, maximizing that would mean having your fingers perpendicular to the axis of the strings. But we don't do that so much in steel string guitar, and that makes it really tough to get a palm mute going if you've got a very perpendicular angle here. Fingerstylers generally have sort of a 45-degree angle to the strings here, or even more so. And it's a little strange that you're plucking into your palm at an angle to the strings. It doesn't resemble that classical style. So, let me go back. Of course, I've skipped ahead in true Coyle fashion. If you're playing classical and you're going to be using that rest stroke quite a lot, maximizing that means getting the guitar off your right knee onto your left knee, angling it up like this, just to maximize this angle here. And that brings the neck in close to your neck, and means you're probably going to be doing very little in the way of thumb over stuff. Totally illegal by a lot of classical guys' lights to do any thumb over stuff at all. But on steel string guitar, it happens all the time. In fact, I probably told you, I got in big trouble. I sold a copy of Salt Flat Rhapsody. I sold a tab to a guy once, $5. I thought, this is great, $5 for a tab that I wrote. And he wrote back. He got back to me very swiftly. In fact, I think he called me and he said, what have you sent me? This thing, nobody can play this. The tune was that little tune I had going in the pre-show there. hands. I can't do a thing with them. That bass line can only be played with the thumb. I've forgotten to indicate on the tab that can only be played with the thumb. Silly me. Anyway, back to palm muting. Carl, I hope you're here by now, if you weren't there before. Well, the way I approach it, and the way I suggest when I'm giving lessons, is that bone right there that has a name in Latin that I don't know, that kind of bony bone right there at the bottom outside of your right palm, or your picking palm, not to be too parochial about the whole thing. Hi, Muggsy. Put that down right on that bridge pin right there. Put it down right there. And then the hand kind of folds over this way a bit so that you can mute the lower strings and leave the upper strings to be nice and ringy. And that's the sound you want. Because in fingerstyle, often, especially in the Travis style and the Chet Atkins style, often what you're looking for is a thumpy bass and then and ringy trebles, so that you're simulating the sound of two instruments playing. You've got kind of a bass going down here, but you've got nice ringy notes up there. And that's part of the mystique of fingerstyle, is to have those two sounds going at the same time. So all of which is to say, if you haven't been doing your approaching the guitar at a 45-degree angle, your fingers to the strings, I'd suggest looking into that, and then try putting that bone right down on top of that bridge pin right there, and let the hand fold over, so that posture-wise you're kind of looking like this. You got a bit of an arch in the hand, so that you can mute the low three strings here and leave the upper strings free, because this part of the hand is not killing those strings in that same posture, in that same position. It's particularly good if you're doing that. Let's see. Usually only need to mute, palm mute, heel mute, whatever, the low three strings. Not always, but most of the time that's what you need. And if I can make a suggestion, if it's not too late to rewire your hand, I found probably well into my 30s that I really needed to retool my right hand altogether. I had been playing pretty much with a thumb and two fingers. A lot of people make that work really, really well. I can't anymore, but I did for a while. It was okay. I did all right. Doc Watson, Merle Travis, some of those guys use a thumb and one finger, which is utterly astonishing to me. But for simplicity, because that's what I like, is simple, I pretty much assign these three fingers to the top three strings. Index finger gets the G string, the third string if you're in an alternate tuning. The middle finger, the flippy finger, gets the second string, and the ring finger gets the high string. And that way, pretty much, my thumb is taking the low three strings for bass notes wherever they are. No real exception would be like a D chord. If I was wanting that D to be my low bass note of the two bass notes, then I'd move the whole hand down so that my thumb was doing 4 and 3, and these two fingers would move down a string apiece. Index would be on the second string, middle would be on the first string. Boy, I've been blathering, and I guess there's a question. Yes, there's a question.
Rod Brown, is a narrower neck or a wider neck better for thumb over bass? Does it just depend on the individual? Is your iPad going to fall?
Hi, Rod. Yes, you know what? I think you've answered your question best. I think it depends. The question is a wider fingerboard better or worser for thumb over stuff? And it depends strictly on the shape of your hand. A thing about thumb over, while we're there, it depends on the shape of your hand and the profile of the neck. A lot of people come into the shop, come into Mighty Fine Guitars. Thank you for asking. That's the name of the shop. A lot of people come in and they say, I need a really wide fingerboard, or I need a narrow fingerboard. Often it's not so much, it's not solely the width of the fingerboard. 1 11/16 for a dreadnought or a jumbo, typically. 1 3/4 for a lot of other guitars, OMs, triple O's, lots of other things. Sometimes really wide, up to 1 13/16, 1 7/8. That can happen. You've got, as you're playing bass notes though, you don't need typically to have really ringy bass notes. You're going to be doing a palm mute some of the time anyway. And often, dirty little secret, if you get kind of a little thub out of that low string, that's fine. Rather than going for a really clear note on those bass notes, go for a nice loud thubby note, because that's often what you need. Now, if you're playing alternate tunings and want everything to ring cathedral style, that'll be different, of course. And then you'll have different considerations for that, but it depends on your typical style of play. Width of the fingerboard is not the only component in deciding comfort on a neck. It's the profile of the neck. Is it deep? Is it shallow? Is it an open C? Is it a closed C? Is it a D shape, really square on the shoulders and flat across the back? I've got a couple of guitars that are like that in the shop. And everybody's hand is different, and people's hands change over time. You may think I need XYZ, and you may. But I suggest trying out some other guitars to see if it's not strictly the width of the fingerboard that's involved, but the profile of the neck as well, its shape and depth and its proportions as well. Bound fingerboards and unbound fingerboards doesn't make a whole lot of difference. I remember somebody asking me about that recently. The bound fingerboards are kind of prettier. You do want to make sure, as you're assessing a guitar, that the frets are all tucked in nicely. You know, sometimes a bound fingerboard is a way to go if you really need to have those tucked in and you don't want to feel them go by as you move your hand up and down the neck. Oh, yeah, I'm going to break down and tune this thing. Pretty good. And someday, if you really want to go down a rabbit hole with me, let's talk about tuning. And whatever you do, don't read a book called, you got a pencil? Don't read this book. A book called How Equal Temperament Ruined Harmony and Why You Should Care. My God, don't read that book. That'll screw you up for months. I speak for myself. It screwed me up for months. This is just fine. Going with your tuner generally is pretty good. Depends on the tuning, though. Tommy Emmanuel has a really cool little video on, I guess it's really on all kinds of stuff. It's on thumb picking. I think it's called it's on YouTube, of course. Tommy Emmanuel discusses thumb picking, and he talks about tuning right out of the gate and timing and all that stuff. And use your ear, trust your ear, rather than sticking solely with what the tuner says, you know. Because sometimes you'll notice that in this particular key, that B string sounds sharp to me. In the key of G, the B string sounds a little sharp. Crank it down. That's fine. Totally legal. Make the primary chord, make perhaps your one chord in whatever you're playing. Let that be in tune. And then everything else will be slightly out of tune. That's guitars. A guitar, at least for most of us, guitars can't be all in tune, all over the neck, all the time. It just isn't in the instrument. It's just not part of what can be done. There are things that can be done to maximize in-tuneness, but it's not everywhere all the time that your guitar is going to be perfectly in tune. So take a look at the primary chord you're playing, I'd say, and make sure that sounds good to you, and go from there. Right, after you use your electronic tuner. Man, I don't know how any music ever got played before we had these bad boys. You used to have to listen to somebody's out-of-tune piano, you know, where this A sounded different from that A, and this E sounded different from that E. Or sometimes we'd tune to the dial tone. Remember those? Some of you are old enough like me to remember dial tones. It was almost a B flat, as I recall. Or was that? That might have been. Not the dial tone. Maybe it was Fluorescent Lights hummed at almost a B flat. So if you had restrung your guitar, taken all the strings off, put the strings on and thought, oh man, I lost my reference point. You used to be able to listen to the dial tone and a fluorescent light and get a start on where kind of in tuneness was if you didn't have perfect pitch. And I hope you never spent money. I didn't, but I hope you never spent money on that course. You can have perfect pitch. You remember seeing the goofy guy with all the teeth and the flannel shirt? You can have perfect pitch. Who the hell wants perfect pitch? The people that I know that have it don't really enjoy it. It's a nice little parlor game. It's a party trick to say, oh, that's an XYZ. Somebody sings a note, I can pinpoint that. That's a this. In fact, some folks I've met can tell you what color that note is. The synesthetic people can tell you what note it is, perhaps, but they can also tell you what color it is. And they'll always be right. If you sing a note now, and they say, that's purple, sing that note 2 years from now, they'll say, oh, that's that purple note. Yeah. Spooky, huh? Brains. Speaking of Brains, if you haven't read it, I'm going to make a few recommendations here while we're waiting for questions and comments. If you've not read This Is Your Brain on Music by a gentleman named Daniel L. Levitin, oh my, what a revelation. I'd say read that. He's got a wonderful new book out called Successful Aging. Also wanted to hip you to a show that's happening tonight on Facebook, and I assume you're familiar with Facebook. Claudia Russell and Bruce Kaplan are celebrating not just 20 years of playing together, but 30 years of marriage today. Could be quite a party at their house, and your house and our house, this evening, I think at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock. But look up Claudia Russell or Bruce Kaplan, and check them out. Michael McNevin does some wonderful webcasts. Very engaging fellow, wonderful singer-songwriter, raconteur, terrific guy. Check out Michael McNevin, broadcasting from the Mud Puddle Shop in this little hidden town in the Bay Area called Niles that not a lot of people know about. In fact, I think it's one of those Twilight Zone kind of things. Or The Loop. Are you watching The Loop on Netflix? It's kind of one of those things where you walk into this, you kind of approach this town, you come around, you're going down kind of a strip zone, strip malls, small businesses, light industry, and then all of a sudden there's a little bend in the road, you go over a bridge, and there's a field there all of a sudden, a field of lettuce or Brussels sprouts, God forbid, or something. And then you take, after that left, you take a right, and all of a sudden everything's different. You're back in 1956. And the houses are all 1956. The town of Niles is kind of 1956. Lots of cool antique shops there, and the railroad runs back and forth. There's a little railroad that runs up and down the Niles Canyon there, sometimes with steam trains, real life steam trains, totally cool. And McNevin's Mud Puddle Shop there, which was a barber shop that, as I recall, Mikey, tell me if I get this story wrong, somebody was carting it down back in the turn of the previous century, it was 1918 or something. Somebody was carting it down the street. They were going to dump it in the bay. This little teeny, about the size of, what is it, 20 by 20 maybe, Mikey? They were carting it down the road on a horse cart, and they were just going to dump it in the bay. And whoever was living in that house, which had been the house where Charlie Chaplin lived, said, hey, where are you going with that thing? Well, I'm going to dump it in the bay. No, put it in my front yard. So they set it up in the front yard. So McNevin's got this beautiful little shop in somebody's front yard in Niles, California, that he calls the Mud Puddle Shop, where he features live entertainment. Head on over and support him with your Venmos and your PayPals, you young people. All your ways of exchanging value and merchandise. The Mud Puddle Shop, he's terrific. Bruce and Claudia, Noctambule are terrific. Marla Fibish and Bruce Victor doing what had been, I'm not sure if it's still going to be a daily broadcast at 12:30 Eastern Pacific time, not Eastern time. You folks are all ahead of us. You're way out there in the future, but it's 12:30 Pacific time. In fact, as soon as we finish up here, I'm going to tune them in. Noctambule, Noctambule. And I realize, Sister Godzilla Marie, I didn't stand up, I didn't repeat the word, so I have to sit down and the big spell down. Noctambule are terrific. Who else are we thinking of? Jorma Kaukonen, one of my great heroes, did a webcast from Fur Peace Ranch last week on Saturday, I think. Richard Thompson as well. Eliza Gilkison is doing webcasts as well. Terrific. There's all what. It's cold comfort in a sense, but my goodness, what a time to listen to great musicians in a totally casual environment. And this is kind of the vibe, the vibe of a house concert. If you're only accustomed to seeing musicians in a concert situation, this business of people sitting on their couches and playing at home. Richie Blackmore and one of the people in his band from Deep Purple, Richie Blackmore was doing this from his castle, from his estate somewhere out on Long Island. What's that? And Paul Simon has been doing this as well with Edie Brickell, just standing up against some blank wall somewhere and singing and playing his brains out, and it's just beautiful to see that kind of simplicity and sweetness. And people in a living room where acoustic music, where this guitar, this instrument is to scale. It's really, this is, a living room is the scale that a guitar was initially, is maximized for, I'd say. So there. Any questions, comments? Just going to try and make these quicker than usual. I keep saying that. I'm going to do it one of these times. Yes, a question in back there.
Lawrence Juber every day at 1:30.
Ah, yes, Lawrence Juber, LJ, at 1:30. Tea time with LJ, of course. Thank you. I bet that was Jen. Thank you, Jen.
Yeah.
Yes, if you know any others, type them in so that we can all go back over this thread and see what's going on. Speaking of online performances, tonight, Monday nights I do a Facebook thing at 7:30 Western time, Pacific time. I keep saying Eastern time. I don't know why. Although on Fridays I do a thing on StageIt, this really cool web-based platform called StageIt.com. And I'll be doing that at 6 o'clock Pacific time tonight to accommodate those old people on the East Coast that over the past 20 years I've met and somehow have gotten older, go to bed earlier. Don't understand it myself. Now that you can play hooky from work, you can stay up late and do all the fun stuff your parents never let you do. It's really fun to stay up really late and sleep really late, if you can. And I realize some can't, of course. So I think that's it for today. Just wanted to talk to Carl in particular about palm muting, make a few recommendations here. If you have recommendations for cool stuff you've discovered online, type them into the crawl here. And if you're on a device and you're not seeing the crawl, tip your device upright and sweep to the left. It's just like Tinder, but for music. Swipe to the left and you'll see a whole bunch of comments there. And you can converse with each other and make suggestions and whatnot. And that would be a really totally useful way to make use of this medium, is to post the stuff that you've discovered that you're really hip to, that you're really digging these days. And that's what I have to say about that. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Stevie Coyle signing off and heading over to Noctambule on Facebook Live. And hope to see you maybe tonight on StageIt.com. Just go to StageIt, plug my name, Stevie Coyle, into the little search box. The show will pop up there. To do that show will cost you $3.50 to get in, but it's a whole half hour long. A half hour of music and blather for $3.50. Come on over. But you should go to the website first and buy what they call notes. That's their script. And you have to buy 35 notes. Notes are 10 cents a piece. I think you have to buy 50 at a time. That leaves you $1.50 to tip if you want. So if you want to buy just $5 worth of stuff, you can. And there's all kinds of cool artists over there. Major dudes and dudettes are playing over there as well. Bonnie Raitt's been over there, and I think some of the Pearl Jam guys and whatnot. It's got a really good scene happening over there. What's that, Tucky?
Bonnie Raitt?
Yeah, Bonnie Raitt's been over there on StageIt. I'm quite sure. I'm not sure if she's doing regular stuff on there, but she has done. And it's a cool platform. It seems to be very stable. People can send in multi-camera shoots if you're all set up for that. But it's all web-based. I used to do StageIt years ago when I first finished up touring with Menudo, and then started touring solo. And then when I finished touring solo, I had been in the meantime kind of doing some StageIt shows because Facebook Live was not happening at the time. And then for a while when the shop was first open, I would do webcasts of the shows in conjunction with the live shows. And then when I stopped doing shows at the shop because things got so busy, I kind of forgot about it until very recently. So I'm back on StageIt. Tonight, 6 o'clock Pacific time, I'll be there. And we have one more question.
Any advice for a 68-year-old left-hander taking up guitar, Kathy Coulter?
You're a left-hander taking up guitar? My very strong suggestion would be play a right-handed guitar. I know that sounds terribly parochial and narrow, but if you consign yourself to playing left-handed, you'll be able to play many fewer guitars in the world. And I can't vouch for the quality of left-handed guitars because I've not seen many. So I'd say if at all possible, switch over to right-handed. If you're going to be starting from the get-go either way, that would be my very strong suggestion right there. Yes?
Teresa and Doug's radio show.
Yes, Teresa Tuduri and Doug's radio show on KTAL Radio. Love it. KTAL Radio. Can they find that at ktal.com or .org or something? Oh, Teresa, are you online there? Teresa Tuduri. Oh my God, folks, you got to tune into Teresa Tuduri. whenever she's doing a Facebook Live, whenever you have a chance to see her, don't miss her. Astonishing performer, great singer, great songwriter, highly hilarious, deep as a well, wonderful gal, terrific. And she does a radio show on KTAL, and she'll type in will she? Teresa, type in the details for us, would you please, for your show and for Doug Adamz' show. Doug Adamz, another great performer. Both Bay Area expatriates, now living in the Pacific Southwest. You never heard of that area? I didn't either. I just made it up. They're both living in the Southwest now, and both working at a radio station doing wonderful radio shows on a radio station called KTAL. And Teresa, I'm sure, will type it in there. Good to see you. Any other comments or questions?
Doug Adamz with a Z.
Yes, thank you. Doug Adamz. Are you writing this down? I'll wait. Doug Adamz with a Z, which is to say capital D, capital Adams, but Adams with a Z. Capital A, small d, small a, small m, small z, as W.C. Fields would say. There we go. All right. I think we've covered a lot of ground today. One more question to ask you. I think this really will be the last question. I'm tempted one of these days, one of these Fridays, to run down to the shop, which I'm sure is microbe-free at this point, and show you some of the cool guitars that are in there. I'm wondering, actually, if that would be bad form on my part, to run, since so many people can't go to their shops and open them up and do anything useful in there. Would it be bad form for me to run down to the shop to show you some guitars of a Friday? It's germ-free. Nobody's been in there for 10 days, 2 weeks. How long have we been in sequestration here? When did World War C start? So let me know what you think about that too, because if there's a quorum there, if that would be cool with you, I might do that next Friday and subsequent Fridays. Just run down to the shop. Another question.
Brian Deller says, is the class over? But Gypsy Jack Van Green says, note, right-handed guitars were designed by a lefty.
Well, that's interesting. I'll have to look that up. Apparently right-handed guitars were designed by a lefty, which kind of makes sense. You know, in a sense, that makes sense, because this has always been a mystery to me, and I think a lot of people that play guitar. If you're right-handed, presumably you have greater dexterity with your right hand. But since so many of us play with a flat pick in our right hands, you don't need particular finger dexterity in that hand. You do need it in the left hand. So why do we call a right-handed guitar a guitar that is played where the dexterity ends up, for most of us, being in the left hand? Think about it. Okay, now you're done thinking about it. Yes, class is over. You're all dismissed. Thank you so much for tuning in. The Friday Noontime Facebook webcast. Join me here on Facebook again Monday night, if you can, at 7:30 p.m., and we'll do a whole bunch of cool new stuff. Yes.
Will they pick up their certificates on the way out?
Yes, you can pick up your certificates on the way out. This reminds me of when I was teaching traffic school, comedy traffic school, all those years ago, where that's exactly what you would do. You would pick up your certificate on the way out. Did I teach you in comedy traffic school, Brian Deller? I don't recall it, but I may have. That was a few years ago. Nighty-night, folks. Good morning, rather. Afternoon. Take your pick. Take them all. And I'll see you sometime very soon here online. Down the road.